Thank you very much.
Are there going to be people in all these seats?
What time you're out?
Why was it here?
I'm leaving right at 6.
Okay.
Mine. I don't know what you guys have decided. What are you doing?
We'll see.
I hate it.
You work down below?
Sorry, that's just my opinion.
I had to
Voice
do
my
it
opinion, can I?
pretty much a turnaround. Drop off some paperwork at a escrow office down there, and then come flying back up here.
I've got them right here. Yeah.
Alex.
Item 5, thank you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you forgot already?
Carlos's. But after. I don't have Carlos's card yet. Okay. Seven.
Yeah. Mine's been on vibrate and I hit the button by accident.
I don't know what
Oh. That ringer volume, did you check that? That might be all the way down low.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of December 13th, 2017. Roll call, please.
Chair Kurth.
Here.
Vice Chair Porter. Here. Commissioner Huber. Commissioner Dew.
Present.
Commissioner Marsh.
Here.
Please rise for the invocation and then the pledge led by Commissioner Porter. Lord, we come to you during this holiday season to thank you for the opportunity to meet tonight. Please bless this meeting so that the decisions that are made are in the best interest of this city and its citizens. We also ask that you bless those affected by the fires and those in the fire's path. Pray. Amen.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have meeting minutes to deal with from November 8th, 2017.
Chairman, I move to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dew and a second by Vice Chair Porter to approve the regular Planning Commission meeting minutes of November 8th, 2017. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Those minutes have been approved.
Starting with item number 1, staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. Item number 1 is case PLN 17-00013. It is a site plan and a conditional use permit to allow for the expansion of an existing self-storage storage facility to include additional storage units and enclosed RV storage with an environmental exemption. This is located at 12569 Bear Valley Road. The proposal includes newly expanded areas on a 3.4 acre site to include 54 RV storage spaces and 160 storage units that range in size from 54 square feet to 500 square feet. The proposal meets Title 16 standards. Staff recommends approval as conditioned, and we're available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing if there's anyone here to speak to us on agenda item number 1.
Good evening. My name is Andy Warren. I'm one of the owners of the Warren Companies, who's going to be the developer on this project. And just wanted to say that I'm here to answer any questions you might have. And of course, we're anxious to proceed, as you might imagine. Thank you very much.
Anyone else to speak to us on number 1? Being no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
Find the project categorically. Subject to all of the conditions.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Porter with a second by Commissioner Dew to approve case PLN 17-00013 as conditioned. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That item has been approved with Commissioner Huber absent for the vote.
Thank you. Thank you and good luck on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas.
Item number 2, staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Agenda item number 2 is a site plan and conditional use permit, case number PLN 17-00029. This proposal is to allow for the development of an approximately 60-foot tall cellular tower in the form of a monopine. It's located at 14026 Hook Boulevard, otherwise known as Brentwood Park. This proposal was originally approved in 2004. However, prior to the development of the tower, the entitlement expired, so they were unable to secure building permits. But at this time, they retain a valid contract with the City of Victorville to utilize the park and install this wireless communication facility. as noted in the staff report, it's camouflaged as a monopine tower. To the left here, to my left, there's a materials board, which staff finds does a very good job of blending in with the existing tree line there, and will camouflage this facility very well at the existing park. It's also located in an area of the park where it will not take away from any of the recreational facilities that are existing. So that being said, staff finds that it meets the findings of all the requirements for a conditional use permit and a site plan, and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project as conditioned.
Thank you. Any questions? Is that material, Alex, is that more modern and new as compared to what we've seen on some of the other mono pine type?
Yeah, yes, it is. And they have graphics on that board that also display what they look like. We have found with some of the older cell towers that were disguised as monopines, the leaves would fall off and they would create a tower that lost all its camouflaged ability and created a mess on the ground. This one seems to be a better quality and of the new standard of materials.
Thanks. I'll open up the public hearing on agenda item number 2. I have a card from Noel Kahn.
Good evening. So I oppose the conditional use permit for 2 reasons. One, negative impact on my home values. I've waited about 10 years just to get into the black. Had the cell tower, well, I wouldn't have bought the house in the location I did if I saw the power lines that are along LA Road or cell towers. And I think that other people might feel the same way. I've talked to some of my neighbors in the immediate area on that corner of Swallowtail and Skipper. They feel the same way. Secondly, it's kind of hard to see from the aerial shot there, but my family usually walks around that track. And in that location, there's quite a bit of bushes up against a chain link fence that's also adjacent to some of the buildings that the school uses. And I worry that cell towers have in the past had electrical fires, and if the fires actually set the brush on fire, it would put the kids at risk. Those are my only 2 objections.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak to us on item number 2? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Yes.
I would like to have the staff respond to the gentleman.
My response to that concern would be all the equipment proposed with the facility is enclosed within a masonry block wall, approximately 650 square feet in size, that would be able to contains its generator, all the other transmission equipment that would be associated with it. So there'd be nothing outside of that equipment shelter that could pose a fire danger. Additionally, the school district was noticed, and we received comments back, as noted in the staff report, initially on this project in 2004 when it was first approved, and they had no objection to the proposed facility in this location.
But, permit me, Mr. Chairman. As relates to it, I think you brought us something regarding home value. Is there a study or of anything of your knowledge that support that this is going to affect home value?
I would not be aware of any studies that would affect home values for a facility such as this, that is camouflaged, designed to blend in with the surrounding park area. Additionally, there's been documentation provided to us that shows that any health effects that have been discussed in the media and so on and so forth are not always 100% true of what they say could be potential impacts of these types of facilities, proving that there wasn't actually negative health impacts as well.
Mr. Dew, if I could add, there may be people who see the addition of a cell tower in a neighborhood as a benefit as well, the increase in cell service. Other carriers could join this, even though you may not be AT&T. Verizon can put their equipment on this pole after this is installed.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, there's maintenance maintenance requirements. It's going to be coated in anti-graffiti coating as well. There's also requirements that if they damage the park at all during any of their installations or service of the facility, that the applicant is required to remedy those and resolve those as soon as possible.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll look for a motion. The public hearing's closed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to find the project categorically exempt per SEQA Section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and adopt resolution number P17-056 approving the conditional use permit portion of case number PLN 17-00029, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and adopt resolution number P-17-057 approving the site plan portion of case number PLN 17-00026, subject to the attached conditions of approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Marsh and a second by Commissioner Dew to approve case PLN 17-00029 as approved. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Case PLN 17-00029 has been approved with Commissioner Huber absent for the vote.
Thank you. Item number 3 is a proposed continuance of a development project. Retail development project. I'll open up the public hearing on item number 3 if there's anyone to speak to us on item number 3. Seeing no one, I'll motion to continue this item to our January 10th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
We have a motion by Chair Kurth and a second by Vice Chair Porter to continue case PLN 16-00029 to the regular Planning Commission meeting on January 10th, 2018. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Case PLN 16-00029 will be continued to the January 10th, 2018 meeting with Commissioner Huber absent for the vote.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Agenda item number 4 is a site plan with a mitigated negative declaration that would allow for a new facility at the Cemex plant over on East Street. Specifically, this would allow for admixture facility that comprises of approximately 21,000 square foot metal storage and processing building. It also has accessory offices, rail spur and pump house that would be included as part of this facility. This proposal was routed through the initial study process, and as noted, it's a mitigated negative declaration. We did receive 2 comments at the close of the state clearinghouse period from the Water Quality Control Board and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, whose conditions have been added as a late addition memo. An applicant's representative is in the audience, and he was okay with those and accepted those conditions as part of this approval. The proposal includes design measures that will disguise the building to match historic railroad depots because of this project's location near the railroad and its proximity to Interstate 15 and its visibility from that roadway. Staff found it pertinent to ensure that the design of this building kept with the nature of that area and what was in the vicinity. So the applicant did a very good job of utilizing design measures that will thoroughly mask the facility. The sides of the building that are open that do not include design measures will not be visible from I-15 or East Street either, because East Street's termination is well east of where this project will be developed. Additionally, there's landscaping existing along the frontage of the site that will remain with this proposal, and additional trees are being proposed along the southeastern property line of this site to further screen the facility from public view. The facility will essentially deal in mixtures that will be added to concrete that can then let the concrete meet desired outcomes, such as tensile strength or curing times or things of that nature, is what this facility will add. So that being said, staff supports the proposal as conditions and recommends approval.
Any questions?
None.
I'll open up the public hearing on agenda item number 4. Anyone speak to us on item 4?
Dean Tondini for Cemix Admix USA. Avail for any comments if you have any.
Questions? No. Thank you. Anyone else here to speak to us on item number 4? Being no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
PLN 17-0, subject to all.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Porter and a second by Commissioner Dew to approve project PLN 17-00024 with changes to conditions as noted by staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Case PLN 17-00024 has been approved with changes to conditions as noted by staff.
Thank you. And good luck on that project. Agenda number 5, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kurth. Item number 5 is case DEV 16-00006. It is a general plan amendment to modify the street cross sections within the circulation element with a proposed negative declaration, and this would apply citywide. The city's circulation element roadway classifications are in need of updating to correspond with the city's non-motorized transportation plan and comply with California's Complete Street Act. The state statute requires that the circulation element of the general plan include complete street policies so that roadways are designed to safely accommodate all users, including bicyclists, pedestrians, transit riders, children, older people, the disabled, as well as motorists. Just to give you some background here and kind of summarize what this proposal is we're planning for the future, and what plans our streets for the future is our circulation element of our general plan. So when developments come in and they're required to build a certain section of roadway, staff refers to the general plan for guidance on what the dedication would be for that roadway. So to give background on how we got to this proposal before you, it started actually a few years ago when an advocacy group for bicyclists approached the council and upper management about the lack of bicycle lanes within the city. Through that process, our city engineer, along with other staff, developed a bicycle plan to stripe bicycle lanes within our city limits on existing streets. Through that process, staff analyzed the fact that our roadway widths aren't preferred. We do meet the bare minimum according to traffic standards, but what we're talking about here is a general plan that's for the future. This is quality of life standards. So most of these things we're talking about are above and beyond what the minimum standards are. Also, in 2011, the city adopted a non-motorized transportation plan. What that did is laid out the groundworks for all of our trail systems and bicycle lanes within the city. but what it failed to do is actually implement within our general plan. The general plan is what gives us the city teeth to require the developer to build that section of roadway to the width that's within the general plan. Also, over the past few years, the city's gone through discussions on our single-family design guidelines. And one of the points that was brought up during that discussion was the edge conditions of our city. That they're not attractive, they look poor. We're talking about the edges of a neighborhood, your arterial roadways, your collectors, which is our general plan streets. So in looking at that, this proposal kind of strays from our existing street cross section where we have a 10-foot sidewalk in commercial that's adjacent to curb, or a 6-foot sidewalk, and it separates that sidewalk and provides a parkway that you'd see in some other cities. So you have that additional separation for people walking along the sidewalk. That's included. Also, raised medians are proposed. This again comes into a safety issue where if the city would want to require a raised median, we'd look to the general plan. If the general plan doesn't call for it, it's harder for the city to impose a raised median on some of these high-traveled, high-speed roadways. Also, we discovered an old council policy about landscaping medians. I know it's from 1990, but we included it in there as to show that there is some outstanding policy there, and there's plenty of square miles left in the city that haven't built out yet, so we could implement those on new developments. Taking all that into consideration, staff met and we developed some draft cross sections back in December of last year and brought it before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission at that time said, go ahead, work with the building industry and get their input and bring it back to us. So at this point, it has been a year later. A lot's transpired in that time, but we've got to a point where we didn't feel comfortable with minimizing the street widths further than what is proposed without getting direction from the Planning Commission. So the item before you today is to mainly get direction. There is a building industry response that's requesting a 90-day continuance of this. We're able to talk about it today and include some type of workshop discussion today. We could also postpone it. And if there's any questions, we're available to work through those tonight. Back to the state statute, the Complete Streets Act. This was approved in 2008, and by 2011, if the city wanted to modify their circulation element, it'd have to include these complete street components. So currently, our city general plan does not have any designation for bicycle lanes within our roadway widths, nor were they originally designed for that intent. Some of the state's reasonings for putting this Complete Street Act was to reduce greenhouse emissions, also improve health, also reduce vehicle miles traveled. The comparison of what we're dealing with on our street widths is a fluctuation on a total roadway width from 4 to 12 feet. So from our super arterial to our major arterial, they're not varying more than 4 to 12 feet in total width. The half width would fluctuate from 2 to 6 feet. So there would be a transition as you go from existing development to new development, like on the west side or the northwest side of the city, where you'd have the larger expanded roadways. Again, like I said, the proposal comes down to having bicycle lanes with buffers. These are Class 2 bicycle lanes. just to kind of give you an overview of the different bicycle lanes that are available to us, there's a Class 1 bicycle lane, which was not proposed, but that's even typically more width. And those are separated completely from the roadway with some type of vertical barrier. So it would be a separate bicycle lane that would have some type of median that separates it from the motor lane. What's proposed in these cross sections is the standard bicycle lane with a buffer. The buffer is a striped area, usually has like diagonal stripes on it to delineate it as a buffer. But it provides some more comfort between the bicycle lane and the first lane of travel there. The raised medians expand, and generally they expand that center turn lane from a 12-foot lane currently to a 16-foot raised median, which would be about a 6-inch curb that could be landscaped. The reason for the increase to 16 feet is at intersections where you'd have a left turn movement, it still allows for a 4-foot median where signage could be installed and not get clipped by vehicles that travel by. If you noticed up at Civic Drive, at Civic and Roy Rogers, where we have that median there, that was squeezed in within our existing right of way, and you don't have that separation, so you'll have some of the signage that's in that median that gets clipped occasionally by the people traveling on that roadway. So also Parkway area, the Parkway would transition from our standard 10-foot from edge of curb to the edge of right-of-way to typically a 12-foot right-of-way. This is due to some of the utilities that are hard to cram within that 10-foot right-of-way. Our dry utilities are normally under that Parkway area. It also provide for adequate landscape width and, again, that separation, that comfort level for people walking on that sidewalk to be separated from the travelway. Another thing that's included was our intersection design. In our current circulation element, we don't address how the roadway should look at an intersection. So if a development comes in that's on the corner, it may be hard for the city to require a dedicated right turn lane. Like some other cities do, this would dictate it from the start. So if the development's at the intersection of two major arterials, they would have to dedicate a dedicated right turn lane. So it's a little bit more cut and dry when these proposals come forward. Like I mentioned before, the building industry brought up some concerns, like I said before, we tried to work through most of what we could, but at this point we wanted to bring it forward to the commission, get their thoughts on it, get their direction, and we're available if you have any questions.
Very good, thank you. Questions at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to commend the staff for their due diligence and towards this project. Second of all, I would be in favor of having a workshop that included the commission with the staff and the building industry. And does that pose a delay that significantly impacts what we need to do or care to do? If we were to have a workshop 30 days from now, 60 days from now, or 90 days from now?
Typically with these standards of a roadway width, we're dealing with future development. So this could impact a proposal that comes in tomorrow, but it would probably mainly impact developments 10 years down the line. This is a long-range proposal that we're dealing with. It's not that like we have an abundance of development that's going to occur tomorrow, and we need to put these in place today. But it is something that if we are modifying the cross section and adding width to it, now is the time before we have another influx of housing or just commercial development, whatever it may be, because we can't turn back the clock after we've allowed some development in and they built to a certain cross width. Now, meaning with before the next boom.
Mr. Chairman, if I may share my thoughts with you, based upon what the staff has indicated, like I shared with you, I'm in favor of a workshop, and I think it would be prudent upon us to do so, considering that the city of Victorville, as relates to state population growth, is ranked 49th. In the county of San Bernardino, we're ranked 5th as relates to growing. And with that said, I suspect we're going to grow more. I think what's before us is how we grow, and that is to grow smart. So I'd like to hear from the building industry. I think it would benefit us as to their concerns and their ideas, or benefit from their experience as to how we can move forward in a smart way. Thank you. I yield back.
Parkways.
Commissioner Marsh? Okay. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing, and I would like to hear, obviously from the BIA, and then if we bring it back and we do end up discussing further of any kind of workshop, then at that time I think we can discuss some more details of that. So with the public hearing open, I've got Mr. Carlos Rodriguez of the BIA.
Good evening, Chairman Kurth and fellow planning commissioners. My name is Carlos Rodriguez. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer for the Building Industry Association of Southern California's Baldy View chapter. We represent approximately 1,200 member companies across Southern California. And I want to start first off by saying in my 14 years at the BIA and traveling across roughly 36 cities across Southern California, I think one of the things that has most impressed me about the city of Victorville is how there's always been a place at the table for our industry. And as we look at how this planning commission has approached important issues such as the design guidelines, the careful consideration and analysis and actually touring and looking at communities, the way that the city council in specifically on the design guidelines and hard discussions on that front and lot sizes and all those types of things led by Mayor Garcia and Mayor Pro Tem Cox. The City Council and the Planning Commission have demonstrated consistently about being pro-business and pro-family and wanting to have a thriving community. And that's really what we want as home builders and developers. And so I think really when we talk to other cities, we talk about Victorville, and we talk about how we've approached a process. And so really what I want to talk a little bit about is that process, and then I'll have my colleague get a little bit more into the weeds this evening. I think, again, the process of having a series of workshops over the next 90 days, segmented by each of these key issues, is important. And we've had some really productive discussions, and I want to thank both Scott and Chris and Brian and the entire staff for working with us and having discussions. But friends can always agree to disagree, and I think that's where we're at right now. We would like to get into like we've done in the past, a workshop setting where we can actually have on screen some examples for you. I think that's one of the things I think is missing tonight, is really being able to see visually what we're talking about. We're going to try to do that a little bit today, but I think the process is really what we're wanting to provide more input. And there's only so much we can do here today in 5 minutes each. And I think there's a number of our members that would like to come to the table and provide some of that expertise as the BIA and our members build across Southern California. And I think we have that type of experience that we can bring to the table, and then have an array of options. And I think that's really what we want to impress upon the Planning Commission tonight, is that what's being proposed, we believe it's in a lot of ways more questions than answers at this point. Safety is first and foremost our concern. We believe that some of the issues relative to bike lanes or sidewalks are a concern. We believe and support the idea of increasing the bar, so to speak. We are supportive, as we were with the design guidelines, of having a top-notch set of guidelines, and this also being a part of that. So really, we want to collaborate. I think it's really important to work with you. We want to be partners in coming to a well-informed decision. And I think part of that process is being able to hear beyond the 5-minute cards and getting into a segmented discussion, workshop by workshop. That's why we believe 90 days is a good, healthy amount of time, so we can really get into examples and have a fluid discussion. Again, I think the Planning Commission has demonstrated in the past that there's a willingness to hear from our industry. We appreciate all the staff time thus far, but now it's in your hands, really, and that's why we're here tonight to say let's continue to have Victorville lead the region in being able to collaborate and make well-informed decisions. And so, again, we would urge the Planning Commission to consider a 90-day continuance for a series of workshops. There's no downside in taking that additional time to get that input from our industry and make as well-informed decision as possible. There's issues relative to cost implications that still need to be answered when you look at issues like landscape maintenance assessment districts and those being financed by property taxes, and having some of the expenses, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in additional expenses, being part of capital improvement program and having part of those financed through LMADs. There's some questions that we really need answers to, separate and apart from the minutia of each of these issues. So we would urge those types of answers to be also brought to the table relative to how ongoing maintenance and what the general fund implications would be years from now. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a card from Mr. Gordon Nichols from the BIA.
Good evening. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. As you said, my name is Gordon Nichols. I serve as the Senior Government Affairs Director for the BIA Baldy View Chapter. And as Carlos reiterated, we'd like to thank the staff and for taking the time to allow us to review the street sections in such a timely manner. It's been almost actually over a year now since we started the process. And it is a monumental task to redesign virtually every single future street in the city. And we would applaud them for taking upon that task and trying to develop a plan for the future. That being said, just a quick timeline. Early this year, we did have several discussions with staff, a few conference calls, and that lasted about 2 or 3 months. And then we took a hiatus and a break to allow a grant for a study to go forth, the Complete Streets Assessment, Safety Assessment, which is also in your packet. And that study took about half a year, so that was one of the major delays. for not bringing this forward to you. And that study really only looked at 2 streets, Bear Valley and 7th Street, and did some assessment on those. So that's just kind of a timeline of what has occurred so far. And thank you once again, Scott and Chris, for your time and allowing us to review it. I did want to address some of the statements in the staff report as I just recently reviewed it this week. It does indicate that BI's comments and recommendations were all addressed, or it kind of alludes to that. In our letter, it outlines roughly 2 pages of comments that we feel have yet to be addressed and need further discussion. So once again, we really appreciate the staff for the considerations that were made, and we've had some great conversation, but we think there's a lot more to be discussed. Also with Assembly Bill 1358 and the CEQA negative declaration and the statement about no additional cost to the city, I do have a personal problem with that statement, and in my personal opinion and professional opinion, that those statements are a little misleading. When you are redesigning every single street in a city, adding oversized raised medians with landscape and hardscape, adding oversized parkways with potential landscape and hardscape irrigation, class 2 bike lanes with 3-foot buffers, and doing that on literally hundreds of miles of streets in the future, there will be a significant environmental impact. And I would strongly recommend to the city to reevaluate the negative declaration and to potentially dig deeper, because I believe that an environmental impact report would be necessary for a design of this magnitude. Many other cities who update their circulation plans go to an EIR first thing. AB 1358 also is a law that's been in effect for quite some time, and it does not require medians or parkways, or it actually doesn't even require sidewalks or bike lanes. It is simple guidelines, and the complete streets are a guideline. So the requirements there are not so much requirements as they are guidelines. And that being said, we are not opposed to any of the elements that are used in the new street designs. We're not opposed to medians, raised curbs, gutters, sidewalks, bike lanes. Absolutely not. We are just have concerns over the size and the frequency and the use of them, and of course the additional cost that it would pose. The additional cost that Carlos alluded to also is we believe that there's significant construction cost. Constructing these raised curb medians versus asphalt is a significant increase in cost that we feel, and we think that option needs a lot more study, including the LMAD situation. We are strongly concerned about the LMADs and the property tax increases that it poses. Lastly, the safety issue that is addressed in the plans. We believe that there's some unforeseen consequences to the widening of the streets that goes against the safety measure and the walkability and the encouragement to use alternative forms of transportation. What's on the table today, what's before you today, is moving for super arterials from 124 feet to 136 feet. Major arterials adding an additional 4 feet. Arterials with the left-hand turn lane moving from 84 feet to 100 feet. That's 16 additional feet. Residential arterials and collector streets, which make up a majority of the new streets, will be increased 8 to 10 feet. If I'm an elderly person or a disabled person crossing a super arterial with my groceries and I have to travel 12 additional feet, that is a significant amount, and that actually discourages the walkability and actually hinders safety in our minds, especially for the collector streets. Those are the streets that are mainly in the residential areas. An additional 10 feet that a child would have to cross a street when they're walking to school puts them at adverse risk. So the widening of streets, although may seem as a safety matter, in some regards it is actually a deterrent to safety and actually a deterrent to being able to get out and walk and cross that street. Crossing a super arterial at 124 feet currently is a daunting task. At 136 feet, it is a significant task. So those are some of the items of the staff report that I felt compelled to address, and in our professional opinion, they need to be discussed further. And if the Planning Commission could indulge me, I'd like to just do a quick demonstration of some of the elements that are before you today, and I'd like to ask my colleague, Carlos Rodriguez, to come up and help me. I'm an avid cyclist. Have a lot of
Size of a road bike handlebar. This is usually the widest part of your bike. And this is a slightly larger version for a mountain bike. So we'll just use the slightly larger version. Currently what's being proposed. Five-foot bike lane with a 2-foot bump. Now, staff originally had proposed 8-foot wide sidewalks. Proposed up to 24 feet. Adopted an LMAD standard, so have a landscape area. Another bike lane that
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nichols? Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak to us on item number 5? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public testimony, the public hearing, and I'll bring it back to the commission for some discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that the point is well taken as relates to the building industry perspective, and also that the value of the staff expertise is also well taken. I think what is before us is coming up with a date, notification of, as my fellow commissioner suggested, that the city council be involved. I don't know if that entails 2 people or all 5, but surely the entire planning commission should be along with our staff and the building industry. So I think what's before us is to come up with a date.
Other comments?
I still think this is a lot of engineering.
I concur.
Commissioner Marsh, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the segments. I mean, we have a 90-day window, so yeah, the segments
So, Chris, Scott, if we ended up doing some kind of a further study on this, maybe we could kind of also leave it up to you on, I know it's going to cause you time and have to make more, knowing that, you know, some of the comments that the BIA is, you know, concerned with. Discussion on those. So I don't know if you guys think that could be done, you know, one meeting, or if it is something that would need to be broken up. Because, and the reason I ask that is because, for me as a planning commissioner, it doesn't happen that often that we hit items that are of such a huge scale that really are going to affect the city for years, decades to come. A lot of the city, and certainly 100% of the undeveloped areas as they become developed. For me, I kind of call this a legacy item, you know, like the design standards, the larger items. And I wouldn't mind going a little deeper on this and get it right.
Sure, no, you're absolutely right. We can do whichever you'd like. We can do a segment after each, like we're having a workshop on cannabis at the end of this meeting. We can do a segment at a time at the end of each of the next 3 meetings. Or we can do one workshop for 3 hours and do a segment on each hour. It's, you know, you tell us what you'd like to do.
I would make this recommendation. Why don't we solicit input from City Council, the Planning Commission, the staff, BIA, and have that information within the next 10 days or so, and then we're going to develop a plan, and then we execute it.
I'm okay with either, and I think I would like staff, BIA, City Council, should they be invited.
My tie will bother you? We have to lighten up.
We could set it up in the conference room and have set it up more like a roundtable discussion.
And I think for me, this wasn't discussed too much, but to take a look at some of these, it always helps to look at other cities that are similar size, or similar population, or similar circulation size. Kind of see if they've made any happy mediums, or if they're sticking straight to, you know, full blown. It helps to kind of look at some of that stuff too. And I know the BIA probably has some of that information too on hand, but that would definitely help. So what do we
Up to you whenever you're available.
that be before our February or?
Right. We won't set the time. What we'll do is work on each segment and maybe talk with the BIA and on each segment that we're talking about, and see how much time we think we might need. If maybe sidewalks and landscaping is not as much of maybe doesn't need as much time as asphalt does. So at the time, you don't need to. You're going to be adjourning to the next meeting anyway. If we add a workshop to it, we can notify.
Okay, so then with that, I'd make a motion that we hold one or multiple workshops, with the first one being the same day as the January regular Planning Commission workshop, with the timing and location to be determined.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Chair Kurth and a second by Vice Chair Porter.
Should we, did you say it'd be best to table this and versus
Well,
continue
I'm
it?
wondering, because this is an item, so we don't want to lose the item, but tabling it, we would basically then come back maybe in 4 months, you know, out a recommendation for the council. We have to out code amendments, you know, all of the language fixes, things like that. So we're not going to be doing that at each meeting. We're not going to have the public hearing at the next item. This item will be off the agenda. We'll have a workshop prior to the meeting, so therefore, we can April? Maybe we could do that. That way we don't have to re-advertise it. We can continue this item to April, have the 3 workshops before that, and then see if we're ready.
I amend my motion as just stated by Mr. Borchert.
Yeah.
I
We
accept.
haven't gotten input from the building industry regarding what will work for them, how to proceed forward. So I'd like to hear from them.
I can open up the public hearing and ask what we've discussed. Is that suitable?
Thumbs up.
Okay.
We imagine we'll have discussions with them in between those times as well to discuss.
Close
On the
close
same
the public
page.
hearing, and that was the motion stated by Mr. Borchert and seconded by Commissioner Porter.
We have a motion by Chair Kurth and a second by Vice Chair Porter to continue case DEV 16-00006 to the regular Planning Commission meeting, April 2018. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Case DEV 16-00006 will be continued to the April 2018 meeting of the Planning Commission with Commissioner Huber absent for the vote.
Thank you. Item number 6, the theaters at the mall. Staff, please.
Does that come up after public comments or?
Did I miss that?
Yeah, public comments. Oh, next. That's okay. You can just go.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. At this time, I'll open up the podium to those who would like to speak to the commission on items that fall in our subject matter jurisdiction. Is there anyone here to speak to the commission? Seeing no one. Oh, yes?
Is this a public comment section?
Yes, general
Okay,
open comments.
On the corner of Hook Boulevard and Olivado, there's Mike's Liquor Store, which is in the Brentwood community. There's a lot of people that come barreling out of that parking lot, cross the double yellows, and sometimes if they can't make that illegal left turn onto the eastbound or westbound lanes, they'll just stay right there in the middle of traffic holding up people headed eastbound. Can we put up some sort of hard median or even those little bumps to make it a little more difficult for people to go over those double yellows? And similarly, if you come down Mojave, just as you come down the hill on Mojave, right where the Victor Valley High School is, people do the same thing over there. There's a double yellow, and they'll do they'll stop in the middle of the road. I think the speed limit there is 40 miles an hour, but as people go to drop off their kids, they're going to stop right there in the middle of the street, do a U-turn, drop their kid off. I think the school has just opened up a drop-off lane if you go down 6th. Can we put some sort of hard median or some sort of barrier to deter people from doing these types of turns? Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any way that staff could take a look at a couple of his suggestions? We do have.
Yeah,
we have his card
he's
and
got
information.
perfect.
So somebody will look into those concerns, probably traffic engineering folks, and maybe even, contact you with any questions or something. Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Okay, item number 6.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Item number 6 is a request from Cinemark Theater at the Mall of Victor Valley. They have done this in several theaters down the hill, and they are proposing to serve alcohol. I think we're saying beer and wine, or were they asking for?
Just beer and wine.
Just beer and wine. To have that available to their customers. They think it'll increase sales, increase profit, and help attract people to the movie theaters. The issue is that the way our code is written right now, it's not currently allowed, but unless the Planning Commission were to find that because of their menu, which in here it says it's attached, but I didn't see the menu on the information that they submitted. Hot dogs, nachos. I'm sure there's more items that they serve. They feel like they could be considered a bona fide restaurant. I guess if you go to a movie, get that kind of food, you could call that dinner. But that's, again, I'm just throwing out the ways. If you want to make this work, the commission needs to either determine it's a bona fide eating place like a restaurant and have that type of a liquor license for beer and wine, or we could require a conditional use permit, which could put conditions on it.
Well, our current code for a restaurant that's serving beer and wine it's a permitted use. The conditional use permit's only required when they're requesting full liquor. So if you're okay with a theater falling under those standards as a restaurant, then we could apply the existing code. If you want to look at conditioning a theater that's just requesting beer and wine, then we'll need to amend the code to require that as a conditional use permit.
Is the petitioner here?
No, they're not.
They didn't take the time to be here?
And I don't believe staff requested that they be at the meeting. This was a item that came up at the counter, like most businesses come in, they ask for information on allowable uses. And since this wasn't specifically addressed in our code of how to deal with a theater that's requesting alcohol sales, we thought it was just more of an overarching issue that we wanted to bring up to the commission and get your direction on.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would think that it would be prudent of us to have the petitioner making the inquiry to give us some information regarding what they care to do. I can assume a lot of things, so I don't want to assume.
Let me open up the, do I need to open a public hearing on this, or is this just?
Not a public
Just
hearing item, but
informational.
you could certainly ask
Okay.
if you're interested.
Well, I don't know. They're probably here for the next. I don't know if any of you guys have any thoughts on alcohol at the movies, on a safety issue. I know I doubt you've even seen this until just now. But if somebody is suggesting that they'd like to question the petitioner, I wouldn't mind hearing on any type of beer, alcohol, wine license, alcohol license. I do like to hear from law enforcement on crime statistics, specifically at the mall, and that could maybe be next time. That's assuming that we don't make a decision tonight.
I agree. I would like to, speak with the petitioner because, when you're talking about, that's kind of a broad scope. In a restaurant setting, beer and alcohol is in a concentrated area. You have tables out there. People can buy beer, wine in the theater. They're carrying them to the different theaters. So we don't know really who's consuming what, So, I just have some questions about that.
The main reason?
It would be part of that, but the part of the request is, as Commissioner Marsh is mentioning, to enable the person who buys the drink to be able to bring it in. That's definitely a concern.
If staff was to put some conditions on something like this, you maybe not even have thought about it, but are there some suggested conditions, do you think, that would be needed here for the extra teeth for
Again,
business
there
license?
are
or-
conditions that might sound good and may make us feel good about approving it, but as you're pointing out, who's going to enforce? How are we going to monitor whether somebody buys a drink for somebody underage? We can condition it all we want. We can revoke their conditional use permit and take away their alcohol license if we actually hear about it happening. But how many instances have to happen before something happens and you find out? So.
On the surface, I don't have a problem with it. I've seen this concept before. I know they have to police themselves.
I think they started, Chair, didn't they start with specific areas where you could drink and then it expanded into?
I don't know. I don't go to the movies.
I don't
Hardly
very
ever.
often myself
But
either.
I've seen it. I've read about it and seen, and being in real estate, a lot of the.
I remember in Redlands there was an area upstairs separate where they served and you drank it up there and then you went down.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the staff, when will the petitioner be able to meet at our next regular scheduled meeting, or what?
We can certainly propose that to them.
Because what I will provide for you are a list of questions I'd like answers to, because I don't care to see adults drinking alcoholic beverage with children watching a Disney movie or anything else. So I have some questions for you.
If that's the feeling, if that's okay. Let's readdress this at the next meeting. Let's see if the petitioner wants to testify to us, because we may have questions. And I'd also like to see, what the Sheriff's Department thinks of the proposal in general. Moving on to item number 7 is a workshop item.
And if I could just step in here, if, like you mentioned before, if you'd prefer this in a less formal format, workshop, like you said, means we don't need to be in front of the microphones. It's not a public hearing process, but we're here to hear dialogue and take dialogue. We can certainly move over into conference room D if you'd like. Make it more
I'd like to.
informal.
Would you?
Logistically, we may have some lag with trying to get the monitors set up. If you wanted to do that tonight, if we've scheduled forthcoming workshops, if you don't want them in this setting, like behind the dais, we can set it up in the workshop.
I think since we're here and we're all set up, we just had one other applicant that we talked about a workshop in a less fun. We have a workshop here and we have an organizational group that would probably appreciate that as well. But for tonight, let's keep it set up since I think we're still information gathering at this point. We're into the weeds. So do we start with the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Kurth. I'd first like to just start off with giving an overview of where we're at in the process of cannabis with the city of Victorville. This item was continued from our October 4th Planning Commission meeting. At that meeting, the Planning Commission recommended an ordinance to the City Council. That was an ordinance that had to deal with a looming deadline of January 1st, where the state starts to issue retail or any licenses that they're allowed to issue starting January 1st. And they required that cities put an ordinance in place that clearly define what the city's regulations are. So I'm going to go over what our current regulations are. I'm also going to hand it off to our Sheriff's Department. We have Lieutenant Ernie Perez here. He works with the marijuana enforcement team, so he's going to provide some insight for you. We also have George Duran, our court enforcement official. He's going to go over some history with you on how these operations spring up throughout the city and what we have to do to mitigate those establishments. So first off, we're at a point now within our 50 states in the United States, 29 of them now allow municipal cannabis. In 2012, Colorado and Washington allow recreational use. 2014, we now have Alaska and Oregon and Washington, D.C. Allowing recreational use. And then most recently in 2016, Proposition 64 was passed by the voters in California, also in Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada. So what we're dealing with now is both the municipal aspect of states allowing municipal cannabis and also recreational use. From the federal level, not much has changed. We've had some attorney generals provide some guidance and memos that say that they're going to back off and let the states kind of do what they want, as long as it doesn't impede some of their policies that they're looking at. For this meeting, we got direction at our October 4th meeting. The commission was looking for some stakeholder input. So we have law enforcement input. We also sent notice out to the local school districts and also to the Victor Valley Chamber of Commerce, hoping that they would also be able to provide some insight. So hopefully we'll have some of that tonight, or maybe sometime in the future. Right. Just to go over our current standards within Victorville. Let me back up to a little bit. We were at a rush at the last meeting to meet that January 1st deadline. Okay. At this point, we're not. Okay. So we could take our time with this. It is quite a beast of an endeavor to undertake. And what I want to outline in this presentation is the steps that we'd have to take if we were going to allow more cannabis activities within the city of Victorville. And then also I want to say that the state doesn't require cities to allow commercial cannabis activity. Okay? The state will not fund grants and for commercial enforcement. That's the only side effect from the state level. And the grants would be afforded to communities that allow retail and also cultivation within their municipal code. Now, this is all new to us, so we don't know exactly what the guidelines of those grants are, how much the city would be funded. So it's something that we'll have to address as these new laws evolve over the years to come. So we don't really have that data to provide to tell you, oh, if we apply for a grant, we could be afforded this much money to help with enforcement. We're not at that point. All right. So with our current standards, it actually went into effect last Thursday. It addresses personal cultivation and across the board commercial activity. First, with personal cultivation, the state requires that we allow cultivation for personal use. The proposal that was approved in this ordinance limits it to inside only. So some municipalities may allow it outside. Ours right now limits to inside only, so you don't have some of the nuisance effects that having it exposed outside would have. The code also limits it to 6 plants, and that's a mandated state allowance. We have to allow personal cultivation at someone's private residence if they're over 21 years of age to grow up to 6 plants at their residence. So that's in our code as it stands. We haven't added additional guidelines to that, regulations to that. From staff standpoint, we don't think it would be useful to and enforceable to elaborate more on the height of the plants and how much space they can take up within a residence. But that's afforded to the commission if we want to look at that aspect of personal cultivation. But right now, as it stands, our code just says you're allowed 6. You can't have any exterior evidence of those of that cultivation, and that includes odor. So the code enforcement would be able to enforce our code against somebody who's creating odor that's noticeable on surrounding properties. And then on to retail delivery. We allow municipal cannabis delivery from outside retailers, and these are only to state licensed facilities that obtain a state license, and it's limited to patients and customers with state ID cards. The medical environment that we're in with cannabis is kind of categorized in two areas to obtain the ability to buy medicinal cannabis. You either get a recommendation from a doctor, and that's as easy as somebody Skyping with a doctor and them writing a recommendation. And then there's a state ID card where you would get it from the county health department. And from my understanding, they're good for a year, cost around $100. But statewide, the numbers I've heard is there's only about 6,000 of these state ID cards that are issued in the entire state. So I don't know how many are in Victorville, but I'm assuming it's only about a handful of them. So what our ordinance allows now is for the people that have a state ID card that they got from the county health department to obtain delivery of medicinal cannabis to their residents from a state licensed facility that's located outside of our city. Okay? Then, go to the next slide. Wanted to talk about the 5 categories of the landscape of how our state has divided the industry and licensed the industry. So first you have retail, and this is going to be about 80% of our discussion, focusing on retail. It's the one that makes the most impact on the city's environments, and it's the one that takes the most time when you devise an ordinance that regulates it.
That's the problem with being in front of microphones and everything. It seems like it. No, if you have any questions anywhere along the way, feel free to stop.
Sure, please stop me.
What does it take to have a license?
To have a recommendation or a
I
state
mean,
ID?
could anybody just get a license? I mean, if someone is...
To sell marijuana?
You can go back to slide number 1. State mandated allowance, 6 plants, and then you talked about where it says must be a state licensed facility. What does it take for a person to have a state licensed facility? What's the requirement?
It's an extensive application. It's an extensive application process that they go through the state, submitting background information, all of the employee information for deliveries, what vehicles, who the drivers are. It's extensive, informative.
Oh, I take it a person can't set up in their home as a state licensed facility for...
No, you're not allowed to do any retail sales out of your home.
Thank you. I yield back.
And just to clarify on personal cultivation, what you cultivate from those 6 plants can't be sold either. All right, it's for their personal use.
Thank you.
All right, so...
You have a question?
Well, if you're going to speak, you might as well come to the microphone.
So the MMIC card, let's talk about that a little bit. I just have to say from my personal understanding and meeting with the person who runs that program, what's her name, Heather? I believe her name is Heather. She runs the program for the medical marijuana identification card. Now, we brought to her attention that a lot of cannabis users who use it for medicine are non-ambulatory, on palliative care, and they can't make the 4 different trips that it takes to go down and get this card. The card can be $60 to $100 depending on the person, and it's You know, if you have an 80-year-old person whose doctor is recommending cannabis as a palliative care or for their palsies, they have to drive all the way down to San Bernardino and then all the way back up here. And then when their card is ready for them to be issued to them, they have to drive all the way back down to San Bernardino and all the way back up again. Now, if you're dying from cancer, or if you have Parkinson's, or if you're in late-stage dementia, or some of these other things that happen to people, they can't drive those distances, and that card is not attainable. So,
Excuse me, you're addressing a part of our code that's already in place right now.
right, and yes, this is a workshop, right? I'm sorry. So I'm letting you know that MMIC card is something that he said it's a handful of people. It doesn't work for the residents of Victorville. So I don't know.
The City Council already approved an ordinance that says who the deliveries can be made to. So that part, unless the commission wants to discuss that, that's not what we're discussing tonight. We're discussing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But that you're requiring it for your code.
She's pointing out that we're too strict and that we need to allow people with a doctor's recommendations to be able to have deliveries made to them.
Because that's common for. Yes. You need a state ID. You need a cannabis recommendation from a doctor before you can go down to get your medical marijuana identification card from the state.
Okay.
So.
I understand that. Do you?
Recommendations.
That's why we're here, is because we have a total prohibition except for delivery. Understand. It's even stricter than you'd liked it. We understand that.
Well, not that I'd like, but it sets your people at risk.
What we're trying to discuss is how Victorville allows it, what we allow, if we allow, that's what we're trying to do. And that aspect of it will be part of the discussion if we decide to move forward with allowing.
Well, Prop 64 passed, so your constituents in your city, your residents, have asked for it. Did you get my email, by the way?
Yes, they did.
Oh, okay, great. So in a nutshell, Weedmaps policy, WM policy, is a great site to go to. It has a lot of comprehensive information. It even has that model ordinance that I was speaking about so that you can understand cannabis a little bit better. And we are members of the Chambers of Commerce, so if you are looking for stakeholders from the Chambers of Commerce, we're here for you. We're proud members for 2 years. And I worked in the education field before, so I'm a stakeholder there too.
And we appreciate
Thank
that.
you so
and
much.
The reason why we're here tonight is because the direction from the commission was given because they wanted to hear specifically from the enforcement side of it. If after the conclusion of this workshop they say we would like to hear from the cannabis stakeholders themselves, we'll set up a workshop. We'll do whatever the commission directs us to do for future workshops. So
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so moving on with the presentation, and feel free, Commission, to interject if you have questions along the way. Five license types are outlined by the state. There's 3 different state agencies that oversee these. And first is retail. That's your dispensaries. That's your brick and mortar locations. It could also be a brick and mortar location that just does delivery only. This is for anything from just your standard cannabis to edibles, anything and everything that's sold to the general public is through a retail license type. That's governed by the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We also have manufacturing. This is regulated by the Department of Public Health. We have a neighboring city. I haven't got to cultivation yet. Manufacturing is just the processing of the marijuana into the product that it was going to be sold as. It could also be the extraction of the THC from the cannabis, but this is the processing component of the industry, where you would be essentially processing like you do other crops. Third is cultivation. This is regulated by the Department of Food and Agriculture. Our neighboring city, Adelanto, has allowances for cultivation, and they also have a ballot measure that created a 5% tax on cultivation of when it transfers to the distributor and to the retailer. So I'll get more into the taxation of it later, but I want to let you know that we are kind of a little bit behind if the city ever wanted to allow cultivation. But the workshops I've been to show that there's probably an oversaturation of cultivation as it stands right now, and as the industry stabilizes, we'll likely probably see less manufacturing. There was a study in March of 2016 by the University of Washington that found that they could supply the entire state of Washington on only 230 acres of cultivation. That's probably around 1,000 acres for the entire state of California. There was also a study by a Canaccord research firm that shows that Canadians are planned to consume over 400 kilograms of cannabis by 2021. Canada is comparable to California in the fact that the population-wise, Canada has 37 million people, where California's population is 39 million. So to put that in perspective, there's the entire demand annually for Canada is 400,000 kilograms, and through greenhouse technologies, there's new cultivation technology under works that could take a 7.5 acre site and produce 80,000 kilograms. So you could essentially only take up less than 1,000 acres to produce the amount needed for California's industry. So we don't know how all of this is going to shake out. It starts January 1st, but we could see the trending of what we're seeing is that through modern technology, we can cultivate a lot on a small area of land. And Victorville hasn't really walked down that path to start setting up these facilities. So we may not even attract a manufacturer even if we wanted to at this stage in the game. I'm sorry, cultivation at this stage of the game. A distributor is kind of the middleman. It's the one that takes the product from the cultivator to the manufacturer, then to the retail establishment. They're also the ones that are tasked with a lot of the collecting of the taxes, and I'll get into that more. And then testing. This is a license type that has to be independent from the other 4 license types. So whereas a retailer can also be a cultivator and distributor, the testing license type has to be independent, which makes sense. You don't want them testing their own product and then putting it on the market. You want an independent company to do that. So that's essentially what testing analyzes. If you wanted to add any more to that.
Yeah, the distributor is the one who calls the testing company. The testing company goes to the distribution facility, and they're the ones who clip the parts of the crop batches takes those testing materials back to the testing facility before they have to meet certain THC requirements and be labeled what they meet as long as they don't exceed those levels.
All right, next slide. So here's just kind of a snapshot of all the different license types. You can see cultivation has a lot of license types that the state recognizes. If you look at a license type 5, the state hasn't allowed these larger cultivation, the larger companies to establish business yet in the city. It's not until after 2020 that these facilities would start being allowed. So with the trending that we're seeing is that you could even see this the cultivation consolidated even further into a few firms that would cultivate potentially for the entire state. Then there's also...
Hang on a second.
Sure.
You raised your hand. I think you were going to state that they left that provision out of the law. I wanted to say I heard that too, that the original whole idea of the
limitations
of the medical recreation, or the recreational, of prohibiting outdoor was to keep the tobacco companies, large industries, from moving into California and wiping out all the small industries that have been here for 10, 15 years doing this business. So they put that stage year when it could come in. But I had heard that as well, that the outdoor, the large scale, when they were doing the final laws, they left it out. So there could be large industry coming in sooner than originally expected. So we need to clarify that. But, that was the original intent.
Speak at the mic just so the rest of the folks could hear you clearly.
I'm Tim Graston, the president of High Desert Cannabis Association. We represent the local community here, and we would like to see the local community represented. The people on Weed Maps that are delivering right now, the people that are cultivating, that have been trying their darndest and paying taxes and stuff and doing the job right. We have no interest whatsoever in big business coming in here. If you guys are interested in it, we will help you in any way we can to bring it in. But right now, the people that are involved in your city need a chance to get licensed, and that's what we're concerned about, is that the people that are around here, that have been here for 10 or 20 years, since 1996, since the personal use came about, those people really need a chance to come in. So we don't really care about, I mean, if you guys want to, like I said, if you want to have the larger cultivation, we could help you do that, you know, but I don't know where you would even put large cultivations at in the city, you know, so.
Well, Mr. Grayston and the commission, I think that's part of the issue, is that the community, the local community that's been here has been illegal. It's been prohibited in Victorville since the get-go. We weren't one of the cities that said, yes, we'll take it. When I refer to the small industry that was out there, those were in cities that went on, right? Remember, this has been around since 1996. Some cities went off and adopted it, especially in Northern California, and said, yeah, let's do this. They've been doing medicinal marijuana for that long. Those are the legal businesses that have been around. Those are the small industries that they're talking about protecting, not illegal.
No. That's, you guys got to remember, without us, we wouldn't be standing here right now. Since 1996, we've been taking the risks. We've been putting our ass on the line, excuse me for that language. We've been putting our tail on the line, and we've been out there on the front lines. I can't tell you how many different people are in jail now that don't deserve to be in jail. And if they were out of jail and not committing crimes, they should have a chance to have an uplift into this community. We are the ones that have brought medical marijuana back into vogue. People are being saved. Lives are being saved because of what we've done. It's not just because we're illegal or we're trying to get over on anybody. We're saving lives. We're not out here trying to make a buck. We're not out here trying to undermine you or party or anything. People out here need this medicine, and that's what we're all about. And the small people that have been doing it, bringing medicine to people for years, are about to be wiped out completely.
we understand that. We talked about that last time. I think right now we're just barely digging into getting the difference between what is cultivate, what is.
Sure.
And we thank you for your interjections,
I just
but
wanted
we do
to-
need to get through this, and then there'll be time for everyone to give their thoughts and fill in the blanks. Sorry? I'm just learning right now, so I don't even have a tone. So you got to give me a break here. All right, Scott. Thanks.
All right, but yeah, it brings up a good point with the cultivation and the sizes that are allowed, because this has been a moving target. I think these emergency regulations that clarify that came out less than a month ago, and they're supposed to go online with all these establishments starting January 1st. So it takes a lot for these local municipalities like ourselves to digest kind of what the state's doing and kind of understand what they plan to do in the future. Also to elaborate, I just noticed too, there's like a type 12 license that just popped up, which is a transporter, which is a little bit different than a distributor. So there's still some clarification that we need to get. And I also think that there was a discussion of a processor license, which is a step down from a manufacturer. So again, these laws keep evolving, and for staff to kind of give you all of the data and say this is how it's going to be, we don't have that luxury right now. It's uncharted territory, and the concern staff has is that we don't want to be the guinea pig. We don't want to start allowing uses, and then if the city council or planning commission ends up saying, oh, well, this was a bad idea, we need to stop this. There's difficulty in stopping an industry that you've already allowed into the city. It's those uses have established rights to operate in our city once you allow them in, once they've set up shop. So if the city were to allow something, we need to kind of vet it all out and make sure that we're making the right decision. It's not a rush to allow these uses because, like I said, if there is an issue with them and we want to revoke their license or put a prohibition on all of these issues, again, it's very complicated once we've already allowed them in the city. All right, so next slide, Jennifer. And I just want the commission to kind of look at these as two types of licenses that we're looking at. We can either just do, if you want to allow or look at allowing cannabis in the city, it's looked at as medicinal only, or you'd be allowing medicinal and the adult use. Next slide, Jennifer. All right, so to kind of lay the ground footprint of how we would implement a new ordinance, these are kind of the main steps that a city would need to go through to allow these uses. First, what we're doing today is community research and outreach. This is conducting meetings, possibly even doing surveys, getting stakeholder input. Items 2, 3, 4, and 6, the health safety aspect, the local industry selection, the application process, the cost recovery, and the monitoring. Those are all components that would comprise a future ordinance if the city wanted to allow a retail establishment or cultivation. So we have to kind of break those down into categories. So if you're looking at the health, safety, and land use regulations in the ordinance, we'd want to be looking at where do we allow them? Is there buffers from schools? Is there buffers from parks? Those are all things that need to be discussed. Then if once we've identified a location where that they're located is, then who do we allow to establish business in our city? So there's an application process. Base that on merits, where you do like a request for proposals. Do you do a lottery system? Those are all things that need to be worked out in workshops and ultimately put into an ordinance. Cost recovery is a big thing. The city doesn't want to be held with all the responsibility of regulating these uses and not get reimbursed for them. So there's a fee process, a fee study that needs to be established that's based off of number 6, what your monitoring and compliance will be. Are we going to monitor these on a monthly basis? The city would have to then identify people within our organization, either the sheriff's department or code enforcement, to do these inspections. From my understanding, the state doesn't have the resources to enforce, to do on-site inspections. So if you're thinking the state has a whole fleet of people out there that are ready to go and make sure these establishments are regulated properly, that's not the case. Over time, as they get some revenue from this industry and start enforcement, you could see something similar to maybe how alcohol beverage control is set up. But it's mainly on the city to make sure that they're not a nuisance and that they're complying with state law and local law. And then fifth, probably one of the most important things is if we were to tax this use, it would need to go on a ballot measure. So that all needs to be discussed about what the taxation rate would be. Is it based on gross receipts? Is it based on the square footage of a cultivator? Those are all things that need to be discussed. So I hope you get a picture that this isn't just a quick ordinance, even though there's ordinances out there that we can prove as a city fairly quickly. But to do it right and make sure that it's vetted and we protect the city's coffers, that it's not going to be a drain on our resources. These are the things that we need to go through. And then also on revenue, the tax. There's the discussion we had about the recommendation that someone gets to consume medicinal cannabis compared to a state ID card. There's a taxation break there. The people that just obtain a recommendation from a physician would be allowed to obtain medicinal cannabis, but they would be taxed on that. There'd be the state excise tax, and there would be any local local tax on that as well. The exemption for people that hold a state ID card would apply to the sales tax, so they wouldn't be required to pay the sales tax. So, for example, Adelanto, they're opening up medicinal dispensaries. The majority of those people that are going to be there and purchasing are just on recommendations, so they're paying the full tax. Okay, so this Adelanto is going to benefit from the tax revenue from just a medicinal. So there's a big kind of a misunderstanding of medicinal not being taxed at all, because you're normally not taxed on the medication you'd get from a pharmacy. Well, that's not the case with medicinal marijuana unless you hold a state ID card. Okay.
The state tax is what we're talking about?
We'd have to look into that further. My understanding is that if any sales tax wouldn't be something that a person with a state ID card would have to pay. They'd still pay the state excise tax, but not a sales tax when they purchase it. But again, that's all something that needs to be discussed further if we even walk down that path. Jennifer, next slide. All right, so the community outreach meeting, the goals of that are to educate the community, engage stakeholders, conduct community meetings, and get direction from the planning commission on the local health and safety priorities and taxation rates. So, like I said before, the city doesn't have to allow anything at this point. If the commission feels that it's something that they want to be cautious about and kind of vet further, that's afforded to you. We're not under the gun to allow any type of commercial cannabis activity in the city. But part of these meetings is what determines that. As staff, we need to know what direction the planning commission wants us to proceed, and it's complicated. As you can see in those last 6 steps, they kind of, some of them all overlap. You know, are we going to allow it without a tax, or are we only allowing it because a tax gets put in place by the voters? So these are all things that need to be worked out if we even allow that in the future. All right, next slide, Jennifer. And then the last slide here is just the main discussion points that we've identified that we want you to kind of focus on and give direction is medicinal versus adult use. If you have questions about that, please let us know, but there's a distinction there. Some cities only allow medicinal. Some allow both. Some allow nothing. Desired license types. We need to understand direction before we start talking further about cultivation, manufacturing, testing, retail. Are those uses that you want to see in the city? If so, we need to address the zoning. How are we going to permit them? Are we limiting the number of permits? Are we creating buffer zones around some sensitive land uses? That would be an endeavor in itself just to identify where we'd want to locate these facilities. Application process, like I said, some cities limit them and do a lottery-based system. Some are limited by just the zoning buffers. These are all things that need to be outlined in an ordinance. Enforcement. How are we going to enforce this? There's usually programs that are set up in an ordinance that dictates how many times we inspect. Enforcement then would relate to the fees that the city would place on a business for an annual business license fee. So we would get that cost recovery for the services that we provide during the year. The regulations, typically these would mirror what the state already has, but the city has the ability to exceed what the state standards are on how they operate. And the taxation, as I went through, is a big one, and there's different ways that you can impose it by square footage of the cultivation, gross receipts, the inventory weight, and the retail sales tax. So there's a lot to discuss. I'd like to hand it off to Lieutenant Ernie Perez, if that's okay with the chair, to give some insight from the Sheriff's Department.
Yes, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Was there a starting point that we wanted to start with?
Whatever you feel is appropriate.
Okay. There's a lot of areas that I could cover related to marijuana. So I'd kind of like to steer it towards in a direction that you might have questions and might be more helpful to you. From our standpoint, we have a lot of experience with our Sheriff's Department with marijuana enforcement. We've been doing it for many years. This is my 3rd assignment to the Narcotics Division, and I manage the narcotics side of our division. And in my previous 2 assignments, I worked a lot of marijuana enforcement, so I have a lot of knowledge with it, and I've seen the evolution of marijuana laws, medical marijuana throughout those years. So even though the medical marijuana laws were the initial law that was passed in 1996 was already in effect, it wasn't, for the most part, recognized for criminal enforcement in the state of California. Marijuana was illegal. And then, so fast forward to where we're at today, there's been quite the evolution, and it's far, far more complex than what you could probably even imagine. And I don't see where we're at today, so without going through all those details and all those steps, changes in laws, case decisions, all those types of things, again, related to medical marijuana, and now we're merging adult use, legal, recreational use of marijuana with medical is what we're doing. I don't see a lot of changes. And so what I mean by that is I think that the evolution that we've seen is going to continue. So what we think are the marijuana laws today that the state has implemented, I would bet money that in the future, next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we're going to see changes to the existing laws. The reason is because there's so many loopholes. There's so many problems with marijuana itself and the laws that apply to and pertain to marijuana. It's just hugely complex and so open to the ability of individuals to take advantage of the system. That's the problem. And there's when it comes to regulation. When I've talked to Mr. Webb previously, we discussed regulation and overall, why can't marijuana be regulated? And a common comparison to for marijuana regulation is alcohol. And the simple answer from our standpoint, from law enforcement and what we see, is alcohol is actually very easy to regulate. And there's specific reasons as to why. And some of those reasons include that the components of alcohol, the ingredients, are geographical, first of all. You can't grow certain things, certain components of alcohol in just any area. It's specific to weather, climate, all those sorts of things. And because of that's the beginning stages of regulation where it occurs. And then to go beyond that, it's a pretty complex process to make alcohol. Again, that further implements regulation. And then it goes on from there in terms of distribution, all the rules that are in place and everything. With marijuana, if you take the marijuana plant, when we're talking about marijuana, regardless of what form it ends up being, whether it's in edible products, concentrates, all the different forms that keep coming out that we're learning about, it all is derived from the plant itself. It's a marijuana plant. That's it. That's what it comes from. And so a marijuana plant literally can be grown anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. Climate is a non-factor because you can reproduce climate. You can grow indoors. You could have the worst weather possible with no sun, but if you decide to grow inside, you can create that artificial sunlight and temperature and everything that you need to create for a marijuana plant to grow. You have extreme heat, on the other hand, it's still fine. That still works out, you know, and that kind of starts to go towards our area that we live in, and in particular, so we're talking about the high desert area being Victorville. Our climate here in this area has allowed for several years now for marijuana growers to grow outdoors 365 days out of the year. So even during our winter months when it's colder and there is some rain, growers in outdoor areas or that are cultivating in an outdoor setting have that ability to continue to cultivate. That starts to contribute to the problem that we have. And so going towards regulation is just so, again, I say complex, it's so difficult for us. In Colorado, the state officials' estimates are that at least 70%, so this is a conservative estimate, at least 70% of all marijuana activity is black market.
Could you say that again?
At least 70% of all marijuana activity is from the black market.
Thank you.
So if they're acknowledging that and they know that, realize that they have that problem, I think the problem's probably far worse. January 1, 2018 starts year 5 for Colorado. So they start in terms of recreational sales of marijuana on a commercial level. So 5 years into it, Colorado has more problems than I think they ever realized that they would have. The money that's coming in from taxes is not what they anticipated on one hand, and then on the other, the outgoing costs, which were just covered a minute ago on full cost recovery, is far, far beyond what they ever even imagined. Those amounts continue to increase and just compound each year, each month for Colorado with all the other secondary effects that you have with these issues. And so for a city, unfortunately, we have some cities in the state that are just simply creating or rewriting ordinances to allow for marijuana. And I think there's this thought process that, well, if we just create the ordinance and we allow it, the money will come in, and eventually any problems that come up, we will take care of and address those issues. That's not the way that it works. You've got to have the infrastructure first. So infrastructure is something that you're all well aware of and dealing with and planning for city development and all those sorts of things. You don't necessarily allow, or shouldn't necessarily allow, a lot of home building and everything without having infrastructure with schools, law enforcement, fire, emergency services, and everything else that you need. It's the same principle here that's happening if you just simply change an ordinance and assume you'll be able to take care of things with what you have. So maybe you think, well, we'll just assign one of our code enforcement officers to deal with the few problems that come up. Or if the city's able to, maybe we'll hire one extra person. That's nowhere near enough. I don't want to go on about our other cities in the area, which I'm sure you're probably well aware of, that are involved in it. There's a lot of significant issues that are occurring and that we're aware of. On the level that we're aware of, it's unbelievable how many complaints we, the Sheriff's Department, whether it's through our individual stations like the Victorville station and every other station that the sheriff provides law enforcement services here, or our direct number at the Narcotics Division, the volume of calls that we get from citizens throughout San Bernardino County, the complaints about the issues that they are seeing and that they're witnessing firsthand. Our marijuana enforcement team does not need to go out and proactively look for investigations to conduct. And that's no exaggeration. They cannot keep up with the volume of calls that we get. They only investigate illegal marijuana activity. So if somebody is in compliance with the medical marijuana laws in the state, and they have, whether it's for their own medicinal use or they're part of a collective or a cooperative, that's not what our team does. We do not send them to those. They are actively working cases where people have absolutely no desire whatsoever to comply with any type of state law or ordinances, for that matter, within the cities or the county. It's just strictly illicit activity, which includes, again, referencing the high desert area, marijuana activity and cultivation where the marijuana is being distributed out of the state of California all the way to the East Coast. By and large, most of the criminal investigations that they conduct are of that magnitude and scale where it's more organized groups working together to distribute marijuana. Now, I know that's not what we're talking about here today. It's about regulation for companies or businesses that want to come into the city with permits and that sort of thing. But if you take all that information together and you realize the difficulties in regulation, so the other thing that we're seeing within some of those cities I mentioned earlier, so you will have businesses that might come in, follow the city's protocols, and then you have other individuals that decide, well, I can't get one of those permits. I'm not within the area, but still I want to be able to do this. So it therefore becomes a land use issue, and you have a debate on your hands as to whether or not that person can conduct their activity. So then at times we're called in as the law enforcement arm to take enforcement action because it's in violation of state law. Well, that puts us in the district attorney's office in a bit of a difficult situation, if you will, in that you kind of through recognition of the state, it's deemed somewhat of a land use issue. So on one side of the street, you have somebody who opens up a business and maybe obtains permits through the city. And then across the street where it's not allowed, you have someone that's doing the exact same thing. Maybe it's out of their house or their garage or a commercial building. And we then go and try to do criminal enforcement against that person for the very same thing that they're doing that the person who on the other side has the permits to do. It doesn't quite work that way. And it's a difficult situation. And so these are all the problems that we encounter and the cities that we're aware of that are participating right now with any marijuana activity are seeing. And if you don't create that infrastructure and have the people in place ahead of time, not just people, but people that have an expertise in dealing with this, the city attorney will have to be heavily involved. There will be a lot of costs for litigation, and it's a difficult situation for a lot of cities. So with that, if you have any specific questions that I didn't address, by all means, I can answer those.
So what you're saying, like one of the points that strikes me, so basically with 70% in other areas that are still operating black market style, even though it's been legalized in different categories. So really the legalization or, the ordinances or whatnot doesn't really stop the illegal activity.
Does not.
Right.
No.
So you have that competition between legal and illegal, and so
the other thing is that you have, so with that, you mentioned competition, you have cost of marijuana. Right. So what Colorado sees is that they have, you've got recreational marijuana, you have medicinal, and then we'll call it black market. You have 3 different categories. Well, in each one of those categories, you have varying pricing levels. And so people selectively, users, the end users, selectively choose which market they want. So a lot of businesses that a lot of individuals that want to start up businesses that are quote legitimate in the marijuana world, truthfully like to claim, like any type of product, our product is better. The truth is that in that market, there is no better. Everybody grows the best right now in terms of quality. So when you have that happen and the black market person sells for a much cheaper price without any taxes, of course people are going to want to go get that. And as long as you have that, that black market's going to thrive. And it's just hugely difficult for cities. It takes a dual component of administrative resources from a city or a county and law enforcement resources to deal with illegal or illicit marijuana activity. What we've learned is that you can't have just one or the other. It takes both components.
I would like to state that what we have got for the staff has been most beneficial. And then we have on hand those people with the expertise regarding the use of medical marijuana and other marijuana, and now hearing from the law enforcement side of it, we have a lot. And I think it's prudent for us to pose some questions to the staff, the pro marijuana, and also law enforcement, and come back at a later date and go over those the answers or the information which we receive from those three entities. And it's been a long day up to this point, and so I would recommend that we adjourn somewhere around 7:15.
Try to wrap it up when we can. I know we're gonna have more questions. I was gonna say I've been doing some, quite a bit of reading, like Denver historic. I always like to look at historical cases to see where things are going, and they did talk quite a bit about black market. But I remember reading a whole lot that they were very concerned with the gray market. Do you know what that is?
I'm not sure
I
what.
remember reading that gray market.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I think you were saying earlier, let's say a city like Victorville decides ultimately that, okay, yeah, let's look at 4 or 5 retail, legal retail outlets. What is your opinion on that? I know you did state that it makes it a little bit difficult for the ones that decide not to, and that's legal and land use and all those. But I mean, if we have that now. If somebody opens across the street, they don't have a business license, they're not legal. Something's going to happen to them if they, Do you think it would be putting an amount of retail shops in a city of 120,000 to service whatever that need is, and I don't know how many that number would be, but if we did that, would that in any way benefit to now we have the legal shops, there's enough for the need. Yeah, there's always going to be people that want to do it under the surface here and there. Would it make it that much harder, or in some cities does it help, do you think?
Well, there's a lot of problems with it because of all the secondary issues. So those secondary issues start to compound for the city in terms of enforcement and regulation, and then with law enforcement as well. So for any criminal activity or just general responses for complaints. The other issues that I think a lot of communities don't recognize until after the fact is, so you have other local businesses that are in shopping centers or nearby in some way, shape, or form. And the complaints that we receive from them as well is pretty significant. So if you have a strip mall type setting where you have multiple businesses.
Mostly smell, or is it?
So that's one complaint, is the odor. It's just unbelievable. They lose business. And so then they decide, they either complain until there's some sort of resolution to that so that they stop losing business, or they close down and they move somewhere else. So then you're left with vacant locations where no one wants to take up occupancy there to start up a new business because of that marijuana store front, the dispensary. So then another issue is the complaints of what is actually seen occurring in front of or around those dispensaries. So there's a lot of secondary crime. There's a lot of, and what I'm telling you is the complaints that we receive. I mean, and these are specific details that we get from other business owners in a variety of areas throughout the county.
You handle, your division handles a lot of different cities within the county?
Yes.
For this drug task force?
So, right, every city that the sheriff contracts with for law enforcement services and all unincorporated areas, our marijuana team provides that service.
Gotcha.
So if you can see the magnitude of what the team does, we don't generally encourage individual stations to get too deeply involved in marijuana investigations because of the complexity and the legal nature. It becomes more problematic if you don't have that expertise to deal with it because of all the legal issues.
What was your experience if we got down the road and we started talking about retail shops? Is it your professional recommendation that it's not worth it?
We do not believe, our standpoint from the Sheriff's Department is that it's not worth it, and that the problems will far out for the city, will far outweigh any gain or benefit.
I wasn't here when have to do, otherwise. Problems for you with
Just that? Okay, so I have not read the ordinance, but I listened to what was being stated earlier, and there are no clearly defined rules for the indoor cultivation beyond that, right?
Yeah, just that
Has to be.
there should be no exterior evidence of it. But yeah,
Okay.
and they're allowed up to 6 plants.
And that's what I was gonna get to. So some of our other cities have very comprehensive rules because, like Mr. Webb said, by state law, you have to allow the minimum of 6. So cities that have really structured, comprehensive ordinances to allow for those 6 specify under what conditions you can grow your 6 plants indoor. So with permit process, possibly inspections, those sorts of things. Because what you'll have is just individuals who truthfully don't know what they're doing are going to, you need electricity beyond your regular outlets in a room. You're going to have to add some sort of commercial grade electricity. And so by doing that, if the city doesn't have an inspection process, you're going to have issues with fire, open and exposed electricity, just everything that would be a normal violation of your city building and safety codes. You're going to have all those issues. And so odor is going to be another problem. And so you could have, we say 6 plants, and I think some people might think, well, I have plants at home, and is 6 plants really a big deal? Well, you can have 6 marijuana plants that are 24 inches tall and 12 to 14 inches wide and pretty small. You can have a marijuana plant that is, and I know this sounds ridiculous because we're talking about indoor, but literally up to the ceiling, 8, 9, 10 feet tall by 6, 8 feet wide. There's the potential for that. So that's the range of a marijuana plant. Now, could you imagine 6 of those huge plants inside of just one room, say a garage or whatever that is? You've got water that's needed inside. You have damage that can occur to the residents. Oftentimes, people are renting homes, and the homeowner has no idea that this is occurring, and they would have never allowed it to begin with. Most of the homes that our teams go to investigate, truthfully, are damaged so extensively and severely in a rental situation that the homeowner has no idea. And the home either needs to be completely renovated, meaning everything has to be torn out, all the walls, the flooring, all those sorts of things. There's water damage, there's mold. There's so many secondary issues that we could sit here and go on and on. The addition of air conditioning units. And if somebody has a pretty decent setup, and they're within their 6 plants, but yet they add some sort of an exterior air conditioning unit. Well, that unit's going to run year-round. And that's another complaint that we get from residents that, hey, what's going on? We have this next to our bedroom. This air conditioning unit never shuts off. There's just so many things that compound the situation.
We at this point right now, we just went with the state, minimum standard. We didn't go ahead with the 6 plants and put any detailed,
Right.
additions to the ordinance. If you're saying that would help, where do you see that helping, and what would your suggestion be? Like, for example, the plants can't be any bigger than X, or they can only be, what would that be, do you think, with your experience?
Right. Right. We have some other references that we could provide the city that are really comprehensive, so that it can safely be done.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're talking. The law allows for it, so it's got to happen. We recognize that, but there are some more. There's some more structure that needs to be in place in the ordinance.
Okay, because now's the time, so I want to look at everything.
Definitely. That's another part of, talking about the ordinance, where there's requirements for a locking door and that sort of thing, so that children don't have access to those rooms.
I know we don't inspect, but if there were complaints.
Yes.
And we did talk about that during the process of the ordinance, and just thought it's kind of ridiculous. Like I was mentioning earlier, we can put all those conditions on it we want, but how do you verify that? What district attorney is going to say that, yeah, go ahead and search this house because you smell it outside there? It just seemed like it would create more problems than benefits, putting all the interior stuff into the ordinance.
We talked about that some cities said it had to be only in. How are we going to go into somebody's house?
Right, and that they could only grow certain amounts of distance, they had to stay 12 inches away from the lighting, and it's just.
I also like to point out that our city attorney, when the ordinance that's in place now was drafted, pointed out to us that there's several cities that are under litigation because they put too many restrictions on their personal cultivation. Whether they have to get a permit, have to go into City Hall and sign up for a list, or there's people out there that think that it's an infringement on their right as a resident in their own private residence to cultivate what they want. So again, these are all moving targets still, that we don't know where it's all going to settle with the state and what cities can enforce. But right now, cities are getting sued because they put too many regulations on personal cultivation.
Real quick question. Now, when we talk about personal use, so what we have right now is medicinal. We have the medical, right?
For personal use,
Personal
you
use.
can do either. It's you grow marijuana, you do whatever you want with it.
Right,
for
that's
personal use.
growing it, but we have the medical, so we really don't have to, it's not a, on one of the slides, it was medical and adult. So we already have medical. They already have, access. People that need it
Oh.
medically have access to it by.
Not legally, no.
Well,
There's not
Jan-
the legal
Delivered-
system
having it
that the
delivered
state put
from
in
out
that
of-
goes into effect in January. So
Right, in January, okay.
So right now, after Prop 64 passed, if you're over 21 years old and you're residents, you're able to grow 6 plants. That went into effect. In your possession, I think there is standards even in our code that it needs to be within a locked space. As far as commercial activity, the only thing our code allows now is for someone that has a state ID card to get medicinal cannabis delivered to them in the city from an outside business.
Thank you, Lieutenant, and if you can forward any other information as we go through this process, to the city, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, we're definitely available for any other questions or assistance we can provide.
And George Dram from Code Enforcement would like to come up. He has some stuff that tears off of what Ernie Perez was talking about with regard to the difficulty of enforcing when it's across the street, you know, that kind of thing, and he's going to speak to the difficulties that we've had.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm the code enforcement official for the city. I've actually been around for quite a bit of the problems that the city's been encountering when it pertains to marijuana, as it pertains to the gray. I think the black market or the gray market you were talking about, in situations where a particular business has a license through the state or Board of Equalization, as well as permit, but does not have city licenses, because obviously we've never allowed them. The difficulty we've been encountering lately has been in the grows, particularly in residential areas. We come across those locations either through assistance through the Sheriff's Department or through complaints that we get from the public. Similar to the lieutenant, many of the complaints are stemming from smell, from excessive air conditioners. And as the lieutenant pointed out, the houses are impacted tremendously. We've seen that many of the owners of these houses either are aware but are not reacting, or are reacting immediately after we send off notice. In our process, our objective is to identify the extent of the damage, to determine if the house is habitable, and to put forth direction to the owner to repair the structure. If they're not repaired, there's quickly a notice of pendency filed against the property to identify the property as a hazard, and eventually fines are issued if the owners are non-compliant. We've seen this again in mostly in larger residential areas, and some in commercial areas. Of concern in commercial areas are sometimes the size of these commercial establishments generate more than just a grow. They're extracting, and the process of extraction requires a whole lot of butane that creates its own hazards. As a matter of fact, there's been a few situations where the butane is still present, so even emergency personnel can't enter until it's subsided. In commercial locations, some of the complaints that we were having, particularly back in the 2011 to 2014 timeframe, was smell. We had a retailer in town that was complaining about a dispensary who was operating illegally, about the smell affecting their product, and as a result, we contacted the owner, and the owner quickly took action to evict them. But that impacted their product tremendously, and along with their clientele. My objective here, I mean, to talk about marijuana is definitely the impacts and the amount of enforcement that it does take for us to follow up on, and the impacts that it has on the community. Back in 2011 to 2014, we had, through the assistance of the city attorney's office, we ended up closing down some of these dispensaries through injunctions. We had, I think, 12 operating dispensaries. 7 of them were closed down through injunctions, and 5 of them were closed down by the owners who were choosing to evict them. But the challenges to get them to comply are definitely there. Many of them don't get resolved right away, which exposes again the property to be unaddressed, unmaintained, and again impacts those who are living around this particular residential location or commercial location.
With the passage of the 6 plants, if somebody wanted to grow, you think that'll ease up some of the larger grows, or are they simply just doing it for cash and the 6 plants are just for personal?
They're doing it for cash. I mean, these grows are extensive. We're talking about, a 4 or 5, 6 bedroom home.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures in the
you've
paper.
seen it. Yeah, so I mean, these are our expectations of the 6 plants is going to be that is going to be the odor issues. We're going to have officers responding out to potentially reported a grow, but it just happens to be 6 very mature plants. And the task that the officers are going to take is whether or not they have enough standing to inspect the inside of this home. That may be of an issue.
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can. Could you come to the microphone? We're going to try to wrap it up pretty soon, but I want everybody and anybody here who else that wants to speak, and if you have something to say, let's do it.
I just want to get out there really quick that the people that you guys give the license to are going to be under the most burdened when this thing becomes legal. They're going to be faced with trying to sell a product that is 45 to actually 100% more than the black market or the gray market, which will be gone, will be able to do. And for them to be able to try to make AMA work, they're going to need the help of you guys, and there's going to be a lot of self-policing that's going to go on. They're not going to be able to handle the loss of revenue for years while this illegal market subsides in a legal market, which is what's happened. I think one of you guys said it here a couple of meetings ago that in the next 4 or 5 years, this is going to be normal. You know, it's all going to be normalized. Everybody's going to be able to get their medical marijuana. Everybody's going to be able to do what they want to do. The state, you know, the people have voted for it. That's what needs to happen. And I'm just letting you know that the people that do get the licenses are really going to be put under a burden because what they're faced with is a product that is way overpriced. So we have to give them a little bit of consolidation that, hey, if you're going into this, you know what you're going into. And plus, you know, kudos on you for trying to take that on to get rid of this illegal black market. That's the way we started. That's what AMA is all about, is to get rid of the black market. It's not to flourish it, it's to get rid of it. And this is the way we do it, step by step. It's going to take some time.
I was just listening to, a radio show, and they were doing a report on parts of Los Angeles that have some dispensaries that are, legalized. But the black market is so tough. They almost can't do it because if that guy's selling it for X legally, why don't I just buy it from this guy at half of X?
Right.
All day long.
Right.
And they said that's what's going on. So how?
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I just want you guys to realize that if I get a license, this is what I'm faced with. It's not going to be thousands of people like you see in Colorado that happened in 2014. It's going to be a few people coming in, because they're going to be able to go to, and that's the other reason why I say the community has to be involved. The medical marijuana community in this area has to be involved because they know their patients. They're going to bring their patients with them, and they're going to explain to them that, yes, I'm sorry, but, this is what it takes to be legal, and taxation is that route. But if you just allow big corporations to come in here, everybody's just going to, tell you, no, that we're not going to have any part of it. We'll just go the illegal route. The people that are involved in this, all of us really want to make this thing work, and it's not going to be an easy task. The people want it here. AMA was passed. The people want it here. Let's bring it in the best way we can, and we're willing to work with you however we can. But it's not going to be easy. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you for your comments.
Chair, just to point out, in your packet tonight, we also had 2 articles, and one of which is exactly what he's referring to, is sticker shock coming with California's new pot market, and that was in the Daily Press. Associated Press article in the Daily Press in November about that, just those issues.
Got it all. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to speak or has some thoughts? Come on up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Ammerman, and I am an administrator of several medical practices in downtown Victorville, and we are not in favor of any type of retail medical marijuana, retail for fun, for kids, for food consumption, any of that. We have serious enforcement problems now with our liquor stores, syringes, the type of people that hang around that affect our business. We have homeless. We've got other things that we can't get the sheriff department out for now because they're so understaffed. If we open anything else for them to have to maintain, I don't know what's going to happen. We've seriously had meetings with the sheriff department discussing all the things that we can do to help them. They don't have any thoughts on that. They're understaffed with too much to do already. So for us, being in the medical field, we don't really feel that having the retail shops are going to help the patients who really need it. Most of the medical industry is going to mail order pharmacies, so to do mail order medical marijuana or for them to have it shipped in isn't going to be any different. So our vote, my physician probably has her own view on the effects of medical marijuana and the benefits. But for me, as an administrator, trying to keep our facilities clean, keep our patients safe coming and going, retail medical marijuana, retail marijuana is not for us.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Then we should discuss
One thing I would ask of the staff is I would like to get some guidance from the sheriff department and from code enforcement. And I'll write out some specific things and present it to you, and then we go from there as it relates to my position.
It is, and if you guys have any directions, or it sounds like Commissioner Dew is going to get us some information after tonight that could help direct us on what you want to hear more about. If that's the way you feel, and if you want to continue that discussion right now, Commissioner Marsh, Commissioner Kurth, if that's where we're at, then that's where we're at, and we can forward it.
I concur. I mean, I feel that, what we have right now is adequate. I mean, as far as what we're doing, as far as reports, like with the law enforcement, code enforcement, I would also like, a little bit more information, because there's a lot of information that's coming around now as far as the medical repercussions, the overdoses, the children that are, getting a hold of certain edibles, not knowing that it's, marijuana or whatnot. But, there's influx. I was reading some articles about that, so there's a lot of, things that we have to look at as far as the overall contents of, of marijuana. It's a broad scope.
Okay, so that's two. It sounds like kind of hold off, we'll look into more information as it comes along, but you're not ready to move in a direction to support.
What we currently have is what I'm for at this particular time frame. I am not open to some sort of Wild West approach where we can go about and everybody can do what they care to do. We have young people, we have families here, we have school districts that have challenges. I sat on 2 school boards, and so I'm concerned about another generation more so than I am more concerned about my own. So with that said, that's my position. So I think the city of Victorville has it right up to this point, and I'm always dismayed when a small state such as Colorado compares itself to the state of California, which has 39 million people. I don't see the connection there. What they can do versus what we can do is far more problematic for us and far more challenging for the state of California. As relates to the legislature, when the legislature come out with something as state law, municipalities, county governments, and local governments be able to adapt what's appropriate for our level of governance, not theirs. So, and tonight, a lot has been said that this is what the people want. Now, I don't know how many people voted for recreational marijuana, but I can say this: I am not convinced that the majority of people really desire approach of marijuana at all costs, any way that we can get it. I'm not convinced of that. Not for the city of Victorville, and certainly not for the state of California.
I'm not prepared tonight to make a motion. I'm open-minded, but I'm always leaning more conservative. But I just think they're still not under pressure. I still would like to see a little. How are these cities, if any, benefiting from it? And taxable sales. All heard those stories, and then now, I'm not so. I'd like to see that before I make a decision. But if anybody wants to make a motion tonight based on what you've said, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know that we needed a formal motion. It sounds like the majority. Instead of sending a recommendation, it sounds like we'll kind of put it in a holding pattern. I'll let them know, I'll send the city council an update that we're not ready at this time to move forward with any recommendation in support of cannabis, either medicinal or recreational. And as new information, new laws come out, we'll update the commission and keep the council updated as well.
Thank you.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Dew?
Absolutely.
That's my direction I'm heading in, and if that's okay.
I
then-
concur.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, well, that does conclude the meeting for tonight. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all who spoke. We really appreciate it. Any final comments from commissioners? Commissioner Marsh? Order? Commissioner Dew?
No.
I have nothing. I was going to try to catch Tessa before she left, and I wanted to, so I guess I'll just say it on the record, because she might still be doing minutes, right, Jennifer? Who knows? But on behalf of the commission, I'd like to thank Tessa for all of her service. It's been great having her as the planning secretary. She'll be missed, and welcome, Jennifer. Any comments from staff? Nope. All right. Meeting adjourned.
To the January
10th,
10th?
10th,
10th, 2018.
2018.